Hi, how are you? This is Dr. Judith. Today I want to share with you briefly about the story of Joseph. Joseph, the youngest son at this time, when the story is being told in Genesis chapter 37. At this point, he's the youngest child of Jacob. Joseph, as most people, if you know the story about him, is that he felt he had obviously been given desires and dreams, and he expressed those dreams and desires to his family members, especially his siblings, and of course they were not very pleased about him sharing these dreams that God had placed on his heart, that he was going to be mighty. We'll use that word right now. He was going to be powerful, and that in the telling of his dreams, he told basically the father and his siblings that they were going to bow down to him at some point in the future. Of course, no one took that they didn't appreciate it. They were very angry. His brothers, whom he had already been reporting on for his father, he didn't do this on his own. His father would ask for him to go and see what they're doing and come back and give him a report. So they already were angry with their brother Joseph, and they were definitely upset with him that on top of everything else that had been going on, here he was now coming to tell them that he saw a future where they would actually be bowing down to him. It troubled them, of course, and as most human beings, that's the way most of us would react. But when God is doing something in a person, and he's sending them to do something, it's not always appreciated by the people around them. And when the person who is being sent starts verbalizing their dreams and what God has put on their hearts, it can become really difficult for those around them. It can really become a pain, and depending on the dreamer's personality and the position in the family and all those nice things, it can become really difficult. Already Joseph was in a particularly difficult situation because his father clearly favored him over the rest of his siblings. He was born to Jacob and Rachel, whom he loved so dearly. And so because of Jacob's love for his Rachel, and Joseph being an issue of that relationship, he really was highly favored, we'll say, by Jacob. And in that regard, Jacob actually had a coat, as in the Bible said, a coat of many colors that he had made just for Joseph. So already Joseph is in a precarious situation. He's the favored one. He is already being treated by their father as if he's ultra special. And so he's in a position where, people usually become very angry with you in that kind of situation. So the brothers are already upset with him that the father shows favoritism. But then on top of that, Joseph goes, and obviously the Lord is dealing with Joseph. He's not necessarily aware. And the Lord has put these dreams on his heart, and then he starts telling, including his father, he starts telling them the dreams. And I truly believe that at 17 years old, Joseph had no idea what he was saying. He was just merely repeating what was, you will say, in his spirit. We'll say that right now. What was on his heart, what was on his mind. And obviously the Lord had placed these dreams in him, and he was repeating them as most teenagers would. Teenagers don't necessarily do a lot of thinking, thinking. They just kind of blurt things out. So that's what Joseph did. The story is really very powerful. It's a great story, and I've fancied myself a Joseph many times, because many times when you share your dreams with others, they can become very offended, especially when in the dream that you're having, they're in a lesser position than you are. It can become really hairy and difficult. So that's what Joseph did, and starts really in chapter 37 of Genesis, where they're explaining what he did. He told them about the dreams and all this stuff, and they became profoundly angry with him. And this led to him being thrown in a pit, him being sold to the Ishmaelites, really being sold into slavery. And his brothers actually then takes his coat, and they were going to kill him. That was the original plan, until one of the brothers stepped in. I think it was Reuben, stepped in and said, "No, we're not going to kill him. After all, he's our brother." And so they sell him into slavery, and they take and dip it in animal's blood to take it back to their father to explain this lie, that a ravenous animal had attacked Joseph, killed him, and this was all that was left of him, was his coat, dipped in animal blood. Of course, the father wouldn't have known that, but that was the plan, and that's what they did. They actually threw him in a pit. Later on, these Ishmaelites passed by, and he ended up being sold. And so he was sold into slavery. They went on back home and told the story to their father. What really gets me, though, and tomorrow we'll get more into the story, what really gets me with this is that these young men, after leaving their brother in a pit, after having him just like he never existed in their lives, after doing away with him, they actually sat down and ate a meal. That points to what the Bible says when it says the heart is deceitfully wicked. Join us again tomorrow. I'm Dr. Judith, and we'll talk some more about Joseph and his brothers, and how many times in our own lives we are sold or thrown into a pit by those closest to us, those we never would have thought would have done such a thing. And how do we deal with the people who treat us that way? We'll continue with the story tomorrow about Joseph and his brothers. Could you eat a meal? Could you sit down and eat a meal after you've known you've done something really, really mean-spirited, evil to a family member or a friend or even a stranger? Let's meet and talk again tomorrow. Until then, this is Dr. Judith. God bless.